but this is only the second podcast that we've ever done live for Coffee and Games, and we are here with SilverTV today, and I'm
Hi
super
guys.
excited. So if you just want to let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, so I stream on Twitch. I'm Silver TV on here. And then pretty much on every other platform, it's at Silver Sable TV.
Perfect. And I'm so glad that you pronounced that because when my husband was talking about getting everything, he's like, "Yeah, I'll." So he did the graphics for this, by the way. So for anyone who doesn't know, we normally have just a regular Guild Wars 2 background and logo, but now we have an actual coffee and game. So it's like a C and a G, and it looks like a coffee maker, and I was really excited about it. So, but he was getting everything for your YouTube and your Twitter. And I kept, obviously, I'd been tagging you and I've been following your memes, which are great, by the way, and I was pronouncing it silversible, like reversible. And that was going to be one of the questions I asked you.
Okay, yeah, that's what you can start there. So yeah, it's Silver Sable. That actually used to be my name on Twitch as well, but I ended up having to change it. So she's a comic book character. So for trademark reasons and stuff, I had to actually take that off of my Twitch channel
Oh,
since it's like a monetized platform. But I still have the handle on the other platforms as well. So yeah, Silver Sable. She's like a female Deadpool, basically, kind of hero for hire. Well, some might say she's more of a mercenary, but yeah, that's where the name comes from.
gotcha. That makes
Yeah.
me feel so much better. And we were talking before the podcast kind of about your past in video games and how now that you're streaming, you've been streaming all of these variety games and MMOs. And you'd mentioned it a little bit when we did trivia together with Stay Safe. And so I thought maybe we could
Mhm.
touch on your background. What made you start streaming? What game were you playing then? And what is your MMO background up until now?
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with kind of when I first got into MMOs, because that was the first thing in that timeline. So growing up, I didn't really spend much time on the computer at all or in front of a screen, like at all. So I grew up in rural Mississippi. I spent a lot of time outside and reading, and I was very focused on school. So I actually didn't even get really a computer or anything until I was a little bit older than most people. So um, I started gaming a little bit. I also had like a console in like middle school, high school. But as far as playing MMOs, I actually started with that in college. So I went off to college my first year at university. And at the time, I was making a bunch of friends. I was majoring in science, and a lot of my friends that I was making were like lifelong gamers. And they would get together like once a week, twice a week, and do their raids and stuff in World of Warcraft. And they actually would just kind of disappear. So we would do all these things in real life. We would go to the movies and hang out and stuff. And then once or twice a week, my whole like friend group in college was kind of disappearing and wouldn't really tell me what was going on. And I was like, what are these people up to? And so one day I just kind of asked them, what are you guys involved with on the side? Can I be included? Like, what's happening here? And basically, they were like, okay, well, we all play a couple of video games. So we have Raid once a week, World of Warcraft, and then also they were playing Diablo 2 at the same time. I was like, well, okay, why has nobody told me about this? They're like, well, you don't play video games. Like, we didn't know you would want to be a part of it. I was like, of course I want to be a part of it. You guys are my friends. So they kind of sat me down and were like, okay, let's show you these games. And at first it was kind of a joke. They set me up with a tune, and I think they put me on maybe a priest or something like that. And they gave me herbalism and mining as my two professions, and they were like, okay, while we raid, you can go hang out in Elwyn Forest and do some like flower collection and mining, and just they didn't want to overwhelm me with like the scope of the world at first. And so I was doing that, and I was like, man, this is really fun. I like this game, but I kind of wanted to get more, I wanted to get more involved with it. And so I was like, okay, what else can we do? How can I get involved together? And I know they were kind of surprised that I picked up on it so quickly and wanted to get involved, but that's how I got started with MMOs, and then pretty quickly I realized there was a lot more to do in MMOs than picking flowers. But I will say, I still love that aspect of gaming, still to this day, professions and stuff like that. So yeah, that's kind of the I guess funny story of how I got involved with gaming in the first place. And then as far as streaming, I've been playing ever since that was many years ago. I guess it was like 2012 or 2013. And I started streaming only a year ago. So after many years of playing, I had several people in the guild that I was running at the time in Classic WoW that just kind of encouraged me to try streaming. So at the time, I was doing a bunch of raid leading and I would do pug runs. So they thought, firstly, it would be helpful for people to see the loot and all of that, just kind of full transparency. And they also just thought that I would be, a good streamer. So they encouraged me to do it. And after many months of saying there's no way it won't work out well, I don't think that that's going to be something that I want to do, I just decided to go live and give it a try, and then uh, haven't really looked back. It's been a really, really fun year for sure.
That's incredible. I didn't realize you'd only been streaming for a year. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So I started, my first stream was like the end of August of 2020.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I streamed my molten core run, and I did that for many weeks because I was at the time trying to get my bindings to drop for Thunder Fury, and that was a really exciting part of doing that. Is I actually have both bindings dropping and crafting my Thunder Fury. All of that was documented since I started streaming it, so it was really cool.
And so now that you're really into it, and I've seen that you've posted some YouTube videos, but not very recently.
Hmm.
Are you looking at posting more? And what do you think about YouTube compared to Twitch?
Yeah, so I think YouTube is great, and I honestly think most people will tell you in order to be as successful as possible on Twitch, it's a smart move to have a YouTube channel and develop it. I mean, it's really easy to have discoverability on YouTube compared to Twitch. However, I don't have a ton of video editing experience, and I feel like I do better in a live format. That's just feeding off of the chat and seeing what's going on. It's a lot of work to sit down and make a YouTube video and all of that. So I've done them throughout this last year. I've posted them every once in a while, but my YouTube channel is definitely not the most active. And I would say that's one of the goals that I have moving into this second year of streaming is to try to focus on that more and push myself because the live streaming comes easy for me and the YouTube side of things does not. So we'll maybe try to get into a bit more. But yeah, so I'm mainly on Twitch.
Right. Okay. I was wondering because I was excited about, and I'm not sure if I had mentioned, that I wanted to, if you wanted, because I always, after recording a podcast, put it on YouTube, and I always tag the person if I can, and obviously give all the links and stuff. And I was going to tell you that if you wanted to, you could record everything, or I could give you a copy of the VOD for if there was something that you wanted to put up. And then I was like, I'm gonna ask her if she really is interested in YouTube anymore, just to make sure, because I was like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You can put this on your channel. And yeah, I have some ideas, I think, in the long term of some things I'd like to do with my YouTube channel, but it's definitely underutilized at the moment, that's for sure.
Do you have any plans for Guild Wars 2 content now that you're really into it on YouTube? I know you said it's eventually possibly going to be a thing that's on your radar for doing more for YouTube, but will it ever be a Guild Wars 2 thing?
Yeah, I think so. So that's actually something that I've talked to my chat a good bit about. Twitch only stores your VOD footage for a certain amount of time.
Hmm.
And I mean, I haven't been playing Guild Wars 2 for that long. It's been, I guess, almost 2 months since I started playing. But I have been saving all of that footage and some sort of like first playthrough series I think would be kind of really cool to piece together because one thing that a lot of people have told me is, um, watching a first playthrough and seeing somebody discover the game for the first time, for people who have played the game for a really long time, it brings some of that back for them and gets them excited about the game all over again, even
Hmm.
if they've kind of taken a break. And then also for other people who haven't tried a game, it kind of can give them the courage to try it because, especially in my case, I have done a completely blind playthrough. So, I mean, if I can, if I can just jump in and enjoy it and get through it and learn, it kind of shows that anybody can do that. And so with the expansion coming out and stuff, I feel like it would be nice to package that up in some way and then put that on YouTube so that other people I know get excited about Guild Wars 2, want to get back into it and going forward. As we start to master the content and understand more things, I think helping other new players would be something that I'd love to do as well, because that's always been something that I've done after I moved past, that blind learning part. It's
Hmm.
I want to know that content and I want people to feel comfortable approaching me to learn it as well, to kind of take that barrier away from being able to learn it, like, the end game stuff. So once we get into rating and stuff like that, for example, like breaking that down and making it feel less scary for people has always been something that I've liked to do. So I could see myself doing something like that. But
We are so on the same wavelength. That's actually what I said I wanted to do after my original blind playthrough of everything with all of the story. I just need to finish the story, but I keep getting sidetracked with everything else. So,
right.
NA raid
Yeah, it's
group was
easy for
Zan and
that to
Stoker.
happen. It really is. It's really easy to get distracted. I hit 80 on my first tune like a week or two ago, and basically the next day the Halloween event came out, and so I told myself, okay, well, the Halloween event is only here for, 5 weeks, so it's limited time. If I want to get in there, I want to get some stuff done, get some stuff collected, and then I can come back to doing some of this other progression stuff. But if it hadn't lined up that way, maybe I would have jumped into some of the other stuff more. But we are kind of jumping into things, I think, relatively early. I mean, I have gotten into some PvP, gotten into some World v World stuff now. We're planning to do our first raid on Friday, which should be a fun experience because we have a whole group of new players and
Mhm.
we don't quite know what we're doing, but we warmed up with doing some strike missions. So just kind of getting the feel for larger group content, I guess. And we plan to roll in there and just jump in. That's kind of been the theme, is like just jumping in and trying stuff. So
Yep, that's what we did too. It was like all new people. And everybody was like, Why do you have a tank that's doing that? Why is your tank this class?" And we're like, because we're testing
yeah.
out the fight. Like, I'd rather learn the fight going in blind than go and learn a strategy and then take that in for, like, you have to see it first, right? And
Right.
actually see if you can figure out the
Yeah,
abilities.
100%. So I actually am going to try to tank for us, which should be even more humorous. I mean, I've always tanked in pretty much every game that I've played up until this point, but I have not yet tanked in Guild Wars 2, and so yeah, I'm locking myself into Chrono Jail and getting that started on Friday, so it should be interesting. Yeah.
At least you're planning on playing something that people think can actually take it.
Yeah,
Not
well, it
a
just kind of worked out that way. I didn't realize that at all when I made the Mesmerks. In the past, I've actually rolled that way with intention, but this time I kind of chose Mesmer because it was the most unique to Guild Wars 2
Mhm.
looking class outside of, I guess, NG as well. And so I wanted to go with one of those things. And it just kind of worked out that way that you can tank on it. So
Absolutely.
we'll
And
see how it goes.
I feel like I got ahead of myself with talking about getting ahead of myself with the game and then talking about us getting ahead of ourselves in the game. So let's backtrack a little bit.
Okay, let's do it.
What got you into Guild Wars 2?
So, okay, so I came from WoW,
Mhm.
and that's been pretty much the only thing that I've ever really given a chance. I was full addicted to World of Warcraft, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. And so, because of that, though, I've really not ventured outside of WoW my whole life since I started playing. So, around like several weeks into TBC. So again, I started in retail, but then I was exposed to classic through private servers, and pretty much once I went down that rabbit hole of Classic, I didn't come out. So I've been playing Classic ever since. So once Blizzard launched Classic, I was playing that, and then once TBC came out accordingly, I was playing that as well. But around, I don't know, a month or two into TBC, a lot of things were going on. The game was kind of slowing down, and many guilds started to disband. So there was a large, like a lawsuit going on at the time. And the day that came out, my guild and TBC, my raiding guild, actually disbanded because so many people were kind of ceasing to play. We just didn't have the numbers anymore. And those who were still playing had already cleared the content. I was already fully best in slot. I mean, it was just kind of a time where people were trying other things.
Mhm.
And so that week, I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to just kind of look around and see what else I can find because it's been a minute since I felt really excited about what I'm playing. And that has an impact on your stream as well. And I don't know if you've ever gone through that as a streamer, but when you get to
Absolutely.
the point where you're playing something, but you're not really enjoying it as much, and it just kind of impacts your ability to stream as often and have enjoyable streams. And I wanted to do better for my chat basically. And so, uh, because I'd only ever played World of Warcraft, my chat, for the most part, my community was pretty resistant to me playing anything else. They weren't encouraging of it necessarily, and they especially were in some cases pretty opposed to it. Like WoW players, there's a lot of tribalism that happens in MMOs for sure, but WoW is very, very much an example of that, where a lot of times if you play WoW, that's what you want to play and that's what you want to watch. So it was kind of a scary thing to say, okay, guys, I think it's going to be the best thing I can do for all of us to branch out from WoW a little bit, integrate a little variety, and try something else. And at the time, I decided that next thing would be Final Fantasy XIV, which I know you've played a little bit as well. And so I went through that transition. It was definitely an interesting time for the stream because a lot of the leveling in Final Fantasy was pretty dissimilar to the leveling in Classic WoW. I know we were talking before the podcast went live about how a lot of times when you're playing an MMO, you're out in the open world, it feels a bit like just chatting with buttons in the sense of you're able to really engage with your community as you're playing. And I like to talk a lot, so that's always been a part of my stream. And as much as I was loving streaming Final Fantasy, with the leveling process in Final Fantasy and the MSQ and how involved that is, it kind of shifted the dynamic of my stream a bit because there was a lot of watching and listening and less talking. And so at some point while I was playing it, I think a lot of my community members were like, hey, this is actually this whole playing other stuff other than World of Warcraft. It's actually not that bad. We're kind
Yeah.
of enjoying this, like it's not as scary as we thought to break out. And I think a lot of other people at the same time were also warming up to the idea of trying other things,
Mhm.
from various things that were going on with Blizzard. And so, anyways, long story short, they were like, this hasn't been that bad trying other stuff. What's another MMO that we really like? Guild Wars 2. And I had never been exposed to the game. I honestly had never heard of Guild Wars 2. I hate to say it, but I actually hadn't. And that was a really exciting. I still remember the day that it happened. Somebody mentioned it in my chat and said, hey, Silver, it's been really fun watching you play something other than WoW. Have you ever thought about trying Guild Wars 2? I remember I said, I don't know anything about Guild Wars 2. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of people from chat started saying, oh, I love Guild Wars 2. I used to play that game. Or, oh, I've always wanted to try Guild Wars 2. And it was like this surge within my community of people who were excited about something other than WoW. And that was so exciting for me as a streamer to see my community excited. Like, not only they had moved from being resistant to other games to being excited about another game and actually asking, like, hey, would you give this a try? And that was the first time that had ever happened in my year of streaming. Like, people actually wanting to be there as a group, as a community, and experiencing something else. And so I was like, there's no way I'm not going to do this. Like, I'm so excited that they're excited. Like, it's kind of like that. We were talking about memes with that last one. Like, everybody was so excited. And I'm like, okay, this makes me excited. I don't know anything about Guild Wars 2, but let's go. Like, we're going to go play some Guild Wars 2. And so I told them, I was like, okay. And it was also really easy to get involved with since it was completely free to download and play. So there was low barrier to entry, which was another thing that made it accessible for a lot of people in the community versus with Final Fantasy, the subscription and just there were like more investments into that. Less people joined in on that playthrough, and virtually everyone was like, hey, we've never played this, but we're going to give it a try because it's free. So we all did it together, and that felt so exciting. So yeah, I remember we downloaded Guild Wars 2. I was super excited to try it since everyone was so excited about it. But I told everyone, if we're just going to see how it goes. Blind playthrough. I don't know anything about the game. At the time, I only really knew. So I'd seen Stay Safe stream it briefly. But I didn't know anything about it, so I had no clue what was going on. And I remember like tuning into one of his streams where he was trying to do something in Divinity's Reach, like I think he was trying to get a Vista or something. At the time, I had no idea what that was about though, right? So I just like tuned in. I'm like, okay, what's this guy doing? He's just kind of like running around the city. And then I met I think before I started playing Guild Wars 2, a couple weeks before, he'd had one of his first game show episodes, and I met Loranity through that, who also streamed Guild Wars 2, and seemed very nice and welcoming. And then I was just like, okay, let's try. It's like so we tried Guild Wars 2, and then I think like the next day we had the second episode of the game show, and I met you and Teapot and some of the others, and like it's just been such a welcoming community. We had so much fun, and then we haven't looked back. So the intention was to add variety into the stream. And for better or worse, we then just became Guild Wars 2 mains, but no regrets. So we're having a lot of fun with it.
I saw that on your channel actually, because I was like, we were double checking everything for artwork, like seeing how we should have the overlay, and it was cute because I was when we had talked for the trivia session that we had, you were saying that you were a variety, and so I was like, oh, I wonder what other game she's playing right now, and it's like the whole last line of your About Me is, so we've been playing Guild Wars 2. We're variety,
Yep.
but we're playing Guild Wars 2.
Yeah. So Guild Wars 2 kind of, I think, found us when we needed it the most, and we've been really happy here. So that's mainly where I've seen. And I will say, I mean, I do. So I haven't been streaming much else. I do have a lot of people who would love for me to integrate some more Final Fantasy. So that might be something that I pick back up on. I also personally am enjoying a lot playing Diablo 2 hardcore. I've been playing it off stream. I haven't been streaming it, but that's something I might want to integrate in. And as far as WoW goes, I'm not interested in playing TBC anymore, but I'm extremely excited about a project we have coming up on the Classic Fresh. Through my challenge leveling community, we're actually planning to try to do a deathless. So I did deathless leveling challenges in Classic, where it's solo self-found, personal individual challenge, and you level 1 to 60 without dying, and you can't use the auction house or trading or anything like that. It was a really fun part of my WoW experience, and so there's a whole community behind it, a lot of great people, and it's been something that I haven't been involved with in a long time because when Classic ended, so did those challenge runs. But there is a Classic Fresh coming out in the next few months, and we're all planning to kind of reunite a whole bunch of us that streamed that and kind of come back to it for a bit. And we're trying to level 1 to 60 without dying again. We're actually taking that group into Molten Core to try to do a deathless clear all the way through to kill Ragnaros. So I'm excited to do that as well. So there will be some variety on the channel, but Guild Wars 2 by far is the main thing that I stream now, and we're loving it. So we're here to stay for sure.
And it really is big just telling people, yeah, the base game is free. You can all try it out. And then it's funny that you mentioned coming from 14 to Guild Wars 2, because I feel like the two games work so well as a pair. Like, it seems like everybody who pays a sub for 14 and plays it, when they have their downtime between the MSQ or anything like that, they're playing Guild Wars 2. Like, it feels like Guild Wars 2 has been so many people's side game, or they just didn't know it existed. And so once you told them that it existed, everybody's like, oh, yeah, I didn't know people still played that. Sure, I'll play it with you. So that's awesome.
I think 14 and Guild Wars 2 can definitely have a lot of synergy if you choose to do that. And I think it's totally that would be a great balance if you were going to do variety and you wanted to play both. I think, and I also think that there's a very similar vibe within those two communities as well. I just have noticed that a lot of really welcoming, warm people in both games, and yeah, I have a tendency to not do things by half measures. So my original intention was to have, variety and do a little bit of both. And I fell in love with Guild Wars 2, and so did everyone else. So we've kind of just leaned all the way into Guild Wars 2. But I know we have some that would like to see some variety, a little bit more Final Fantasy. So I tell
I'll
them
help you level wherever
maybe
you want.
eventually. But yeah.
No, that's incredible. You're fine because I was the same way. Well, I was more just gung ho about the story where like I started and I was checking out every single thing that I could interact with because I feel like for other MMOs, and I don't know if you've come across this, there just aren't as many things to interact with that you can just click on and they have this full story or like all of this ambient dialogue that isn't just like one line as you're running by, it's an actual conversation. And so for my first playthrough, just 280 through the core story, it was doing all of that and exploring. And then I got to the Living Seasons and Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, and I just blew through the story for all of them. So I completely get where you're coming from with no half measures. Because I've been meaning to start Living Season 4, and now I'm going, I think I did this too fast. I'm going to take it easy and level an alt, which I saw that you did recently. I think you were leveling a Necro, was it?
Yeah, so I leveled my Mesmer to 80, and we got through the personal story on that tune, and then with the Halloween event and the bonus XP, I figured that would be a good opportunity to get a couple of ults on the table. And again, because I did do the blind playthrough, I kind of wanted to experiment with some other classes and see what I might want to mean moving forward before I did any sort of large scale investment of gear and stuff like that. I didn't want to funnel all of my resources onto the Mesmer and then just for lack of not trying something else, not try it basically. So
Right.
I rolled the Necro, and we've made quite a few other alts that haven't started being leveled, but we're having a lot of fun just planning different tunes to play. And so the thought is I have my Mesmer, that's currently my main. I have my Necro, that's almost max level now. And then I think the plan is to do Ranger and Guardian next. It's a lot of alts, but basically, after I do that and we kind of feel out these different things, I think I'll probably decide on, the one that I would like to main. But I guess my Mesmer is kind of my main, and it's especially going to become my main a bit more once we get into the raid with it on Friday. So I may continue to play that one for the most part. But
I feel like it's hard. I feel like Guild Wars 2 is very, very alt friendly, and because it's so alt friendly, it's like I'm gonna have one of this, and this, and then I need to try the story on this and do the elite specializations. And so you said you had classes that were planned out of what you were thinking about leveling. Do you have anything that you've tried so far that's just your least favorite class that you're not sure about the play style yet, even early
uh,
on?
not, I guess not really, because I've mainly played the Mesmer and I've absolutely loved it. And so rolling alts after playing the Mesmer hasn't been because I disliked playing as the Mesmer. It was just to try other things. So I've mainly played that. I've loved Necromancer so far. I guess the only thing that comes close to being a little ambivalent is I made a Char NG, and I loved playing as Char. It was so fun. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, if I had made anything else, like I was thinking to myself, so I think I've actually enjoyed my Necromancer as I've leveled it even more than I loved my Mesmer as I leveled it. So I was telling my community, I was like, man, if I had made this Necromancer Char and combined those two things, I feel like I may have never made another ult. It's just so fun running around on one of those. But I made this a Char Engineer, and that was my first time using one of the gun options, and I loaded in. I barely played on it, but I'm using a pistol on that tune, and I haven't quite loved it. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to love Engineer. I mean, there's other things that I can play with, but it's just a different feel. I don't know, weapon wise. I always like playing with like swords for the most part, or a bow or something.
Mhm.
So guns aren't always like what I enjoy playing with. So
Me too.
I guess that's the only thing. But yeah, but I barely played it, so yeah.
I actually felt the same way when I first started. Engineer was one of the first things I tried because I said that I love high fantasy. Like everything I really like is Tolkien-esque. That's why I like World of Warcraft. So even in WoW, I would never use like a blunderbuss or any of the actual like engineer profession mounts because I couldn't stand the sound and I didn't like that it was mech. And so it's just
Yeah,
funny that you mentioned.
The Mechana Strider I can still hit haunts my nightmares.
I think mine actually to be fair was that free mount that they gave you to level the chauffeur, that motorcycle. I just can't
Oh my
stand
gosh,
it.
yeah.
But it's just funny because you had like the exact same reaction. But once I started playing it, I started really liking the kits and I felt better about engineer, but that was how I felt to begin with and I was like I wasn't even sure I would like char because of there being like
Mm.
what do you even call them? Coal punk? But
Yeah,
yeah.
like yeah. I don't know, but yeah, I agree, and I think as far as that like that element of the fantasy, I feel like that's something that has there are more similarities between WoW and Guild Wars 2 in that way than there are between like WoW and Final Fantasy, for example. Because in Final Fantasy, it's like there's definitely a lot out there that interrupts that experience, right? Like there's like large like limousine mounts that will come flying through the air and stuff like that. And so I do think
Mhm.
that's another reason too why my community was really excited about Guild Wars 2 because it preserves that a bit more, which is what I don't know a lot of people like about WoW, I think, as well.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Absolutely. And speaking of these other two MMOs that you've played before Guild Wars 2, how did you feel about the new player experience in Guild Wars 2 compared to those two MMOs? Like, did you have trouble getting used to the hybrid action combat after playing Tab Target for so long for an MMO? And did you think it introduced you to mechanics and such as well as other MMOs? Or did it do it better, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I'll say I like the flexibility of the leveling process in Guild Wars 2. I like when I'm leveling to explore in a world and experience it. And I think Guild Wars 2 does a good job of that while also giving it some structure. I think the punctuation of the experience, like every 10 levels with the personal story, I really enjoyed that. And so that's how I leveled, as soon as I would hit, level 10, level 20, I would unlock the personal story and then I would do that. And I think that provided some structure and context. Also, I'm very much a lore person, and I know not everyone always is, but I always like that element of games when that's a part of the leveling experience because I feel like it fully invests me in the world and in my character, and that's something that I wouldn't get if I never did anything lore related and I was running around. So it's kind of a balance of those two things.
Mhm.
But there were definitely some differences in playing Guild Wars 2 from my games that I played in the past. And so most noticeably, yeah, the dodge mechanics in Guild Wars 2, that's not something that I've ever really played around. And so I don't think I quite realized for quite some time when I first started playing. And as I was leveling, I didn't quite realize how important that was, like the dodge mechanic. And so things like that were things that I had to figure out along the way. But yeah, I like the design of the leveling process in Guild Wars 2 for sure. Yeah, and I felt pretty intuitive. I think the more MMOs that you play, even with those differences, like as time passes, it's just things are less challenging to get into. When you've only played one MMO that first time branching out, it's a little scary, but then after you've played, a few others, there's always, there's similarities. So
Mhm.
it felt pretty intuitive, even though some of the combat style was very different. But I do like the fluidity of the combat style in Guild Wars 2 quite a bit. It feels really, really good.
Absolutely. I thought the same thing. And I feel like, I don't know if you've come into contact with this, but when I was streaming my first playthrough of like the personal story and doing everything organically, it was funny because people would, obviously, everybody's really sweet in the Guild Wars 2 community. So they would be giving advice and they're like, oh, this might
Mm-hmm.
give you trouble. This might be a little tough. And then you burn through it and they're like, Oh, and it's like, okay, it's my first time playing Guild Wars 2. It's not my first time playing an MMO. I don't know if you've had any experience with that streaming it yet, but
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Because like I think also it's just uh, because you get a bunch of new community members, so it's definitely it's been really interesting. Actually, that's been a big part of my experience as a new player, and it's been any time that I've played a different game. But people don't know your background or what
Mhm.
you've done in the past, and I don't know. I don't have like a list of everything that I've ever done down in the panels, even if people read those, right? So if somebody pops in for the first time and they see you as a new player, they might think, okay, you're just like a noob across the board and you don't know what's going on at all, right? But it's different when people have seen you raid competitively and they've seen the things that you've done in other games and they understand that you'll kind of get the hang of it. And so I guess that's an interesting part of doing a first playthrough. And I feel like that's also an interesting part of streaming a first playthrough is first playthroughs aren't as engaging for everyone. I feel like when it comes to watching end game progressive PvE content or like PvP content, like once you get into some of those things, I feel like most people enjoy watching that because it's like at a higher level, and if the streamer still maintains engagement with chats, it's there's not many cons to that. But with a first playthrough, it can actually be kind of tough to like sit and watch somebody, and I know it had to have been like I think back to some of the things that I was doing when I was first playing Guild Wars 2, and things like not understanding a dodge mechanic and not using that, or for the longest time the joke in my chat was, and I hate to talk about this, but as a mesmer, I didn't know what blink was because blind playthrough. I don't know what that is. I don't have it. And my chat was like incessant. Silver, you have to train blink. But they wouldn't say like where I would train it. So it was just like this thing where people would bring it up and I'm like, chat, I swear if somebody mentions blink one more time, I'm about to just never train it. It's like I just because like I'm tired of hearing about it. I don't know what a blink is. I don't have it. So I'm like running around on my little Asura, like no blinking whatsoever. And then like eventually I got it and I was like, okay, this is really good. And obviously I use it all the time now, but it's just like little things like that can actually be challenging to watch. It's like, if you're somebody who, has tanked content and then you watch somebody who's new to tanking it, it can actually be tough to sit there and be okay with that person not knowing what they're doing. And people always want to help. But so it's mainly been kind of like memey things like that when it comes to like abilities that I haven't trained and stuff. And, people trying to give some feedback. But for the most part, I think people have been uh, pretty pretty respectful. We haven't had like too many issues with backseating or anything. Like people do just for the most part try to help, and they don't usually do it without me soliciting some help too, which has been pretty good. But yeah, so definitely they underestimated me quite a bit with the clock tower jump puzzle. That's something for sure. I remember I heard about it pretty much as soon as I started playing. They were like, "Oh, you know what? It's gonna come out next month. There's this Halloween jumping puzzle," and they said to me unanimously across the board. They said even if I spend all month all month practicing it, that I would likely never complete it. And I was like, man, it's really that hard. So I was so scared. I went into the clock tower and I was so scared of it. We got it done. We got it done that night, but it's funny. Yeah, it's just part of it.
Yep. I actually did the same thing this year. It's my first Halloween with Guild Wars 2, and it took me probably an hour. I think it was an hour of talking to chat, memeing, falling, and just being silly. And I actually had
Yeah.
posted a YouTube video on it, and I don't know if you got some people that had said this in chat, but in the YouTube video, people were like, "I'm a 9-year veteran, and I've not completed that jump puzzle. Like, I can't believe that there are people that have gotten it done in the first night." And I think it's more of like a I think I work better under pressure. I don't know about you, but for like the other
Yeah.
jumping puzzles in the game where you have to actually map a course and it's this very, very, very tiny ledge that actually doesn't look like it's there, people are really good at that. I'm not.
Hmm.
But when it's something I know
I'm
I
the
can
same.
jump on
Yeah.
and I can do it really quick.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like the pathing was easier to identify for me. Like to map the pattern in my mind was way easier doing it like that than it was for the world jump puzzles, and that's where the source of doubt came from for them, because seeing me do a world-based jump puzzle where I'm just trying to identify where the path even is, those don't really go well for me at all. So that's kind of where the source of doubt came in. But yeah, everybody's different for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I thought it was funny because people and I can see the issue of going against the clock for other people being tough. But then those are the same people that would do like I don't know if you've done Chalice of Tears yet, which is in oh no? Oh.
Mm-mm. I
Okay.
don't
So
think so.
how far are you with the story? So you just gotten
So
your 80 this week or this past week and then the Halloween event came out. So
yeah, so I haven't done the story beyond the personal story, which has
okay.
been a point of contention because people are like, you really need to do, more of the story. So it's trying to balance, like I hit 80 and then I started leveling some of these alts, and the intention was to kind of pick up with the story once I got a couple of alts to 80 and decide which one to do the story on. So yeah,
Gotcha.
it's something I plan to get into the story more, but I also wanted to get a couple of ults rolling, which again, with the timing of the Halloween events and stuff, I've been focusing more on that.
Oh yeah.
And also, we've gotten distracted with some of the other end game content, if you will, with decorating the guild hall and just working on farming materials for upgrading the guild hall and stuff, because we're trying to progress that a little. So yeah, I just every day I go live and there's kind of a plan, and then things will pop up and we'll end up doing
Yep.
other things
That's Guild
outside of the
Wars 2.
plan. But yeah, I very much need to set aside time for the story. But I think I might want to do it on one of my ults instead of on my main at the moment. So we'll see.
That's
So yeah.
actually a really good idea as well because it'll be something that you feel comfortable and that you'll be excited to do the rest of it. And because I've gotten like halfway through and then I decided Elementalist is my main and I was like, I'm having a lot of fun leveling this Necro. So I'm going to finish. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to boost this. I'm going to do Living Season 4 on this, but I haven't actually gotten back to the story with it because of that, because I keep getting distracted. And it's the same as you said. It's like every day I'm like, I'm gonna do Living World Season 4, and then I'm like, but I haven't tried Guardian yet. And I haven't actually done any crafting and gathering yet, so I'm gonna do that. So I
Yeah.
completely get it. But with the story that you've done so far, and you said that you actually did like quite a bit how it was delivered, how do you compare the story that you've seen for the core game to like Final Fantasy XIV, for example? You said that you did play that beforehand, and a lot of people really praise the MSQ. So how do you feel about the delivery of that, especially lore-wise, compared to Guild Wars 2?
So I'll say it's a little it feels a little challenging to compare it because I feel like there are so many differences between the two deliveries. So I'll say, as somebody going through the leveling process, I preferred the delivery of Guild Wars 2 from a gaming leveling perspective. I enjoyed that, not feeling so restricted into doing it. However, I think because there is such a prominent MSQ in Final Fantasy and you have no way around it, and I mean, I think if you probably looked at the amount of time that you spend in the MSQ in the story in Final Fantasy, it's like exponentially longer than the amount of time that you're spending in the personal story in Guild Wars 2. So it's kind of tough to compare it because if I'm looking at, leveling to max and my investment in a storyline, I would say I got to the point of being more invested in the Final Fantasy storyline more than I have with the Guild Wars 2 storyline, but I think that's just because I've spent way less time engaging with the storyline of Guild Wars 2. Does that make sense? So I think it's one of those things where that having the flexibility in the leveling process has so many pros, and for me, it's one of the biggest pros and one of the reasons why I've liked Guild Wars 2 more overall. But it's also it's been something where it's like we're dipping our toes into the story a bit more than we are just like jumping all the way in. So I think my investment with the story will come in more as I continue to move beyond just the personal story and the leveling, and we get more into it. but I think the delivery was great as always. And one thing we talked quite a bit about that I loved way more in Guild Wars 2, the voice acting is awesome
Mm-hmm.
in Guild Wars 2 as well. So it's well done. I just think you spend less time with it as you level, so it's kind of it's hard to compare them. But
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just curious because of for me the lore for all three games is so vastly different, and it's different in the way it's delivered because I feel like with World of Warcraft, which is was also my main thing. It's actually kind of funny listening to you say I was only playing World of Warcraft. Like this is all I because I have
yeah,
all of the WoW novels, I have all of the chronicles, I've read all of that, but I feel like most of the story for that, even if you read the quests, is only for a specific hub or a raid. Like you can figure out why a boss is in the raid from listening to, you know, their quest in a quest hub in a new area. But other than that, it's mostly in like chronicles and books. And then you get to Final Fantasy XIV, where yes, it is main story quest for anyone in chat who was wondering about the MSQ. It is so ridiculously long. People were clocking it at, I think, like 200 something ridiculous amount of hours that is absolutely incredible if you, like, even if you skip some cutscenes, but it's required and you can't do it until you get to dungeons with other people. It's solo. And so, but all of the lore is in the game rather than outside of the game. And then there's Guild Wars 2 where you could do
right.
everything with people if you wanted to. You know, you could burn through it. I wish it scaled a bit more when you did it with other people, just because I like doing everything with other people. But that's why I was curious, because it's so completely different. And I think the reason why I liked the delivery with Guild Wars 2, and I don't know how much you've liked to explore in the game, but because it was spread out like that for the every 10 levels, and you could choose to do it or not, but having it every 10 levels was like, okay, now you have to explore because you get experience from
Right.
exploring. So now you have to do other things. Whereas for 14, like you could hit a wall where you're not the right level to be able to continue with the main scenario quest or main story quest, or you would just burn through it and that's all you would do rather than actually exploring. And it's like all instanced for the most part. So that's why I was
Yeah,
curious.
it's very different with the main story quest and having to kind of like it felt like in Final Fantasy XIV, yeah, exactly. I think what you said was perfect. Like pretty much the entirety of that lore, not all of it, because obviously there are many other Final Fantasy games, and there's a lot of
Right.
seeds that are planted, Easter eggs along the way that you would understand more had you had that prior knowledge. But it's pretty much there, delivered for you, and you're incentivized to do it and go through it. Although some people would, I guess, like skip the cutscenes and stuff and just not pay attention, but it's all there. And so I guess with WoW and with Guild Wars 2, I think there are some similarities there in where it's a bit more flexible. If you want to get involved with the lore, you can. And there's also large resources that will get you more into the lore outside of the game. So you just like at least so far in my experience, it seemed that way. So I remember when I was going through WoW, I would kind of like go along and I'm like, I wonder why this is this way.
I'll
And I
help
would
you
actually
level
have a lot
wherever
of
you
people
want.
in my chat who would know those answers. And then we would end up on the WoW wiki and we would learn about, oh, okay, like this is why this type of engineering came to the game because this group of people was, like doing this within the world. And so I think with Guild Wars 2, there have been times like that where I'm like, this is interesting. I wonder what there is, to learn about this. And there's a wiki full of great information that you can read pretty quickly and get into it a bit more. So, yeah, I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see how once I get into the living uh, storyline, and everything else that comes next, how it will be. I'm excited, and I have been a little cautious. I mean, part of trying to get some things done without having progressed into the story.
Mhm.
People worry about spoilers and stuff like that. So I did get my raptor mount and my glider on my main. So I had to briefly pop in, and people were a little nervous, like, okay, this is gonna be beyond what you've seen in the story, but I don't really think I saw anything that was too spoiler based in doing that, and it's made my quality of life way better as I've worked on things I can imagine. Not having my gliding and stuff, getting my hero points for my elites back on my mesmer. So it's been nice having those things. But
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think you worded it very well. And it was funny, speaking of little things that could give away spoilers, I actually spoiled myself on two parts of the story that I haven't done yet. One was from Twitter, which was ridiculous, and I'm like, how? Like this is old
Oh
content.
no.
And then the other was I was looking through all of the minis and I saw the name of one and I was like,
Oh
oh,
no.
all of this that I had predicted. But I won't go too far into it because you haven't gotten to certain areas yet. But I am really excited for you to see the way the story is delivered and how instances are handled once you get into the next portion of the story. It's actually really, really cool. And speaking of you saying when you had started World of Warcraft that your friend group wanted you to gather and check out some flower. How do you feel about, have you done much crafting in Guild Wars 2 so far, and how do you feel about the crafting and gathering, like having the tools that you would have to replenish unless you get, you know, the tools that don't disappear, and have the charges off of the gem store, as well as actually being able to discover recipes while crafting.
Yeah, so I love the gathering and the crafting stuff. So I've now leveled tailoring up to max on my mesmer, and then I've gathered pretty much everything as I've gone along. I quickly was introduced to that my tools would disappear after I gathered so many nodes, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh no, I'm trying to get, I was like trying to get a tree or something and I couldn't get it. And I was like, there's no way. And my child was like, yeah, you have to buy more tools. So I
Mm-hmm.
pretty early on decided to make the investment of the unlimited tools. And I have absolutely zero regrets because, like I said, I do love gathering stuff. So it's been really nice having that for quality of life. Although it is, it's not account wide. So it's, on my one tune. So now that I'm leveling alts, I have to either switch them over or, buy the regular ones.
Yep. I just
But yeah,
realized
I've
that recently, and I've been playing a little bit longer than you. A little bit,
yeah,
I say in quotes. I was just like, oh, I don't have my gathering tools. This is
I know.
bad.
Yeah. So those have been nice. There have been a couple of quality of life things that I've gotten so far while I've been playing. Also, the copper-fed salvage-o-matic has been another one too that has been really really nice to have, like little things
Mm-hmm.
like that for quality of life. I've enjoyed a lot. But yeah, the gathering professions, it all feels good. It does.
And have you crafted yet and gotten the chance to discover recipes?
Yeah, so in doing my tailoring, so I leveled tailoring up to 500 to be able to do some of my gearing for my tunes,
Mm-hmm.
and so I've gotten through that a little bit, the discovery process. But I will say I saw you leveling cooking the other night, and just kind of like plugging things in and discovering
Yeah,
whatever
just
you
being
could
silly.
make with the mats that you had. No, it actually I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. I haven't sat with my professions and done that. Like I was just kind of specifically like an ends to a means sort of a thing, like just trying to get from point A to point B with my tailoring. So I haven't gone into just like that exploration mode of seeing what all I can craft. And I think cooking is a good one to do that with. I feel like that would be really fun. So I plan to do some more profession leveling soon. But yeah, like I said, I've held on to my resources a good bit in game, like things that I guess you would buy if you were intentionally leveling professions, just because I'm not sure yet which tune will be my main, or if
Mhm.
there's something that I'll really want to level. Just kind of being cautious, I guess. But
And it was just
yeah,
it was neat for me, especially coming from World of Warcraft, because the crafting was as well, especially for retail, where it's just like, okay, I have everything I need. I can make 50 of these, and then you click on it, create all, and just walk away. And so, like,
yeah,
actually discovering something is really cool. And then I don't know if you how much crafting you've done in Final Fantasy XIV, but how there's actually like a rotation to make sure that everything has like a good durability, and you have to have a certain durability before the end to make sure it's high quality or something like that. And so I think that Guild Wars 2 is a happy
yeah,
medium between the two.
yeah.
But
Final Fantasy crafting was definitely it was definitely like a different part. Yeah, having actual rotations for your crafting was quite different. I did do a bit of it. I tend to level fishing in pretty much every game that I do, so I checked out the fishing and I did that. It was really interesting. But yeah, I will say I prefer more like so Guild Wars 2, and then also New World does a great job of this as well. But just like that's like the ability to sit there and like I don't know. I like the crafting in this game for sure.
I was actually going to ask because I saw you tried New World. How do you think, like, what do you think about that, especially in comparison with just trying Guild Wars 2? And as a new player comparing both. Like I've had a lot of people who have played Guild Wars 2 and were like really, really, zoned in on that, like very tribal. And then they're like, no, I'm gonna try New World. And now all of a sudden it's like the big thing to say how much people dislike New World and how much everybody is like, man, I really appreciate everything in Guild Wars 2 now, or now I really appreciate this. So how do you feel about that? And how do you feel about people saying things like that actually?
Uh, so I'll say as far as my take on New World, I've had a good amount of experience with it. I've been playing since like alpha and beta, and I think overall it's a good game. I mean, I think it has
I'll help you
value
level
for how
wherever
much
you
it is.
want.
It's something like $40 for the game, and I think it's worth at least that much.
Mhm.
And I also think it's a really exciting and for many people who are, I guess, MMO lovers and not the lover of a specific MMO, to have a new MMO on the market to get into where it's pretty much an equal playing field for people involved. So, for many people, a barrier to trying a new to them game, so something like Guild Wars 2 that they've never played that's existed for so many years, has is that perception of okay, the meta is already figured out, people already have these accounts that are like min max to the nines, and if I jump in as a new player, it may be hard for me to do that. Are people going to allow me that new player experience in a game that's already existed? Or like there's like a lack of discoverability in the sense of you have the freedom to play what you want, how you want it, but at least in a new game people are still forming those opinions and trying these new things out. And so I think for a lot of people who enjoy MMOs and want to have that, equal playing field and discovery process, I think New World is a good one for those reasons. And so I think a lot of people were excited to try it. But I do also think that there are some things with the game that make it not for everybody, but that's every game. So just
Mhm.
because a game is good doesn't mean it's going to be a good game for that person. And so I think when people say that playing a different game made them appreciate the things that they liked about their game, maybe it's just that they're refining what they like about MMOs and they're realizing, I do like this part of the game. So, and that way it has value because it helps you identify what you like. And so for me, I guess when it comes to New World, I have played it a bit, and it was enjoyable for what it was. It's not something though that's providing me anything um, that I'm not getting out of Guild Wars 2 at the moment. So it's not something that I've really funneled a lot of time and energy into. But
Mhm.
I think graphically, it's a really cool game. I think it has like similar combat styles, so I could see people being interested in it. And obviously it's backed by Amazon, which is like huge for the eventual development of the game and like discoverability and getting people excited about it, which always has some pros. But like so for me, the cons of New World have been, I think the leveling process is kind of repetitive and a little unforgiving at times, like some of the questing. And I also think at the moment, like with where the game is at, the end game is more PvP oriented. There's not a ton of incentives for doing like the max level rating and stuff like that when it comes to your gearing and how that works. And for me, I've always been more so of like a competitive PvE type of person and less of a PvP type of person. And I'm trying to get involved with both in Guild Wars 2, but
Mhm.
so it's not necessarily what I'm looking for, but I could see it being something that other people are looking for. And it's really aesthetically pleasing game as well. Like it's nice to look at, but
Right.
yeah. So it's not something that I've spent much time in or that I plan to spend too much time in, I guess, at the moment. But never say never, I guess.
Right.
You know.
And I was just curious because I don't know if you have checked out the Guild Wars 2 Reddit, but it was just like the first 2 days when all of the server problems were happening for New World. It was just like the Guild Wars 2 Reddit like wasn't even about Guild Wars 2. It was about how people had stopped playing Guild Wars 2 to try out New World, and now everybody's like, I'm refunding to go back to Guild Wars 2. And I purchased the game. I haven't played it yet. My husband has played, but I was just curious because all I know is from what he's told me, and I didn't know if it was really to the point where people were like, oh, Guild Wars 2 is so much better. So I'm glad that you actually gave me some insight on that, and that was actually.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
and I also think too, you always have to factor in like I think especially for like this specific situation with you know well first all first off it's Reddit, so I
right.
think there's always like going to be a degree of skepticism there, but also I think looking at the stakes of it, I mean it has to be a pretty scary like I think inherently, like for better or worse, when there is a new game on the market and you are content with the game that you're playing, you're excited to play it, you have all of your friends and community that is based in that game. I think when a new game comes to the market, that can be a little scary because sometimes, like, that divides communities, right? Like, it's like, okay, well, I have 5 friends that are super excited to play New World. I don't care about New World at all. Will I get to play with my friends anymore? Is that going to divide us? And I think, especially when it's a game that's backed by such a large company with such large marketing, I think a lot of people were nervous, from that perspective of like not wanting to play and then losing, you know, like the time that they're spending with their friends. So I think that sometimes funnels that. I think sometimes people are, so like I think maybe that was like some relief that they were feeling to see that the game has problems because people were super positive about the game's launch
Mhm.
and maybe in some ways that was scary. But I know that's always going to be the case, I guess, anytime a new MMO comes out. So like Ashes is one that I think that's probably going to happen to an even larger scale because at least with New World, I think there was some skepticism of New World. People didn't seem to be extremely excited about it until much closer to launch, versus something like Ashes is so far down the road, but people are already excited about it, and
Mhm.
there's been less skepticism. So yeah, it's always interesting to see that for sure. But yeah, it's not really for me, but that's
Yeah. I think one
it
of the
seems good.
biggest things was they ended up changing a lot between the original alpha and the beta, and there was a lot more on the store that people were upset about as well for the
Mm.
game, or that you had to buy. I didn't really look into it that much. I just knew people were upset about it. But because they changed so much, people were actually really excited about the launch. And speaking of which, since you've played, Classic and TBC, where they actually did a lot more with the store for Blizzard, and I actually talked a little bit about this with Stay Safe as well. But since you've actually played 14 and you know about the Mog Station too, how do you feel about the Gem Store comparatively to those two?
So it's still something that I'm navigating and learning about. So I'll say again, I started with retail WoW, but as somebody who comes from the classic community, it's a hard sell to have any sort of uh, in-game purchases. Like it's just something that's unique, I guess, to like our classic community. But I feel like pretty much anybody that you ask that has come from classic WoW is pretty resistant to any sort of in-game shop, and that's just part of it. Uh, and so it's always scary to see that. I think so. The questions that you start to ask are um, is is this being in the game going to make anyone, not just necessarily yourself, but like a different player's experience have less value because they don't have the same resources in real life?
Right.
So for many people, we go into this world of gaming and we're kind of escaping that in a lot of ways, and so it's nice to feel like there's a space that exists where you can be just like anybody else. And if you put in the time and the efforts, and in some cases you have that good RNG, I guess, of getting what you need to get, that you can be that most geared, like juiced out person in the game, right? And not that somebody else can come in and swipe a credit card and have that much more easily. And so I think so that's like the I guess the principle behind the hesitancy of having any sort of in-game shop. But I think also, like, realistically, even in games that don't have that, there can still be serious issues with economy and like real money trading and things like that that are going on, even without like a formal venue for it. And that's certainly been a problem in Classic, and at times it's been to the detriment of the game because unlike something like Guild Wars 2, where you're not as or Final Fantasy, where you're not as restricted by servers and everyone is connected, and you can go to the market board or the trading, like any of these things, the trading posts, and all of the servers are connected. There's no faction allegiances, so the impact of any sort of uh, okay, maybe I'm like derailing a little bit, but I guess what
You're
I'm
fine.
trying,
I know what
I'm
you're
trying to
getting
organize
at.
my thoughts. Like, yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is with classic WoW and that community, there's a big impact that happens when there's any sort of like external influence onto the economy, because we are divided by factions, we are divided by servers. So if you have a problem with botting, or if you have like any sort of RMT that's going on, it can completely throw the entire server into chaos and
Mhm.
create problems. And also, people just like usually want an authentic experience. So I guess as any other classic player would, coming into Final Fantasy and Guild Wars 2, I was curious to see how those gem stores work. Um, and I'm still kind of figuring it out. So I don't have much of an issue with paying to look pretty, as I guess you would put it, right? Like, I think cosmetics and things like that, I think those things are perfectly okay. I guess the issue comes in with that, and back to that like topic of gearing is like if you have more of a pay to win experience, but that's a controversial term because what winning looks like in any game is subjective. So, I think how I define that is typically can one player's ability to pay for something make another player's experience more difficult. So one of the good things about Guild Wars 2, from what I've seen so far, anyways, is something like PvP is not impacted, even if you can um, buy gold and then use that gold to gear out your character. You can't, like, that gear does not impact your PvP experience because everyone is kind of neutralized and it equals out. So I guess really all that it seems to be doing it again, because I'm just kind of looking into it and getting to know the process now, but it seems like, from the perspective of paying for gold or something like that, it would maybe just make your PvE experience more easy, but then like that doesn't minimize somebody else's chance to have a positive PvE experience. So I don't see a huge issue with it, I guess is what I'm saying. And obviously, from a marketing perspective, with the game being so accessible and not having a subscription fee, it's always the game needs a way to continue, growing and going. So I mean, to monetize in that way, it always makes sense. I think that's also why New World is doing something like that. Like, it's again, you just pay $40 for the game, but there's no subscription. So of course, there's an in-game shop for cosmetics. So I don't know. We'll see. I guess as I learn more about it over time, I might change my opinion, but it doesn't seem to be something that is like at a detriment to the game at this point in time. So we'll see. But
Yeah, and I completely got what you were getting about the factions as well. I actually miss when the auction house, even in retail, was restricted to factions. I felt it was like so much more. It fit the fantasy much more because you're on two different sides. Like it doesn't make any sense that you would trade like that. So. I know that you were going further with it, but it actually kind of hit me a little bit hard because I was like, oh yeah, I remember when it was just Horde only, and then people from Alliance had
yeah,
started buying my stuff. But
all right,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And speaking
but yeah.
of,
And so far,
oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, so far there have been some very fun elements to it. I will say it's been fun having some of the cosmetics and stuff like that. Uh, I've enjoyed those things. So, oh my gosh, my dog. Sorry.
You are completely fine. My husband just had to take our dog out because he ran into the back of my chair. So he was like, all right, I'm going to take him out. And I'm like, okay, he's like, I love you. And I'm like, okay, I love you too. I'm doing something. Um,
You can just like see his shadow on the wall. It's like a monster coming for me. It's just my dog.
it's perfect though for, the Halloween season to see the
Yeah,
the big monster
exactly.
shadow on the wall. But speaking of gear, since we were just starting to talk about it, do you like the idea that the gear progression is horizontal? Like, have you messed with, since you were trying to do everything blind and organically, your own builds and traits, and tried to find the best gear type that would be compatible? And how do you feel about that versus other games having a strict, like, this is your gear for this raid, like this is your best in slot, this is your best in slot?
Yeah, I've enjoyed the flexibility of gearing and also your build in general in Guild Wars 2. And I mean, that's something that I think games like Retail WoW, they do a better job of than Classic, because obviously it wasn't meant to be that way back in the day. But I'm so used to playing in such a restrictive setting when it comes to this specific set of gear that you have to get, and paying this amount of gold to even like mess around with your build at all, to be able to perform your best in PvE versus PvP, and then changing those things out and having to farm those resources so often. And I mean, it can be a little punishing. It was in Classic and TPC, so it's been nice having some freedom with being able to sub different pieces in and play around with different builds, and then also like decide that I'm gonna do PvP today, and I don't have to pay to change out my build for PvP. I can just switch it out, and then it's good to go. But I will say I haven't fiddled around with my gearing stats a ton. In leveling my Mesmer, I went with this like Berserker build, just more glass cannon approach. Kind of kill things before they kill me, and I've stuck with that. So I haven't taken advantage of the flexibility of the gearing. I just found that I like that, but it definitely is a pro for sure.
Mhm. And I feel like it helps people as well be able to go between multiple games or play the game at their leisure, because they don't have to worry about, okay, now I have to farm this raid. I mean, you might for something else like, LI or
Right.
trophies or whatever, but not necessarily for, that specific gear, and that you can change things. And not necessarily, if you don't want to play as the Trinity, you could have like your Mesmer and you could play support, you could tank, depending on what you wanted to do, or just like hardcore DPS, which I think is a lot of fun. And so you had mentioned that you had been doing strikes and fractals. Did you do all of the dungeons as you leveled up through the story as well, the regular and the explorable modes?
Yeah, I did both, and for the most part, we had all new player groups for all of them, which was really, really fun to just kind of explore it together.
Hmm.
Um, and I will say, yeah, you mentioned the Trinity. That was by far, I think, still the most jarring thing that has happened in all of my leveling in Guild Wars 2. And my first playthrough has been going in and trying to get a group for our first dungeon. And I'm like, okay, guys, tell me if you guys want to jump into this group and tell me what your role is. And everyone's like, Silver, you don't have to worry about that as we do these dungeons. Like, we don't need a tank and a healer and 3 DPS. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean? There's
Right?
like, what do you mean there's no tank in this dungeon? Like, my mind was blown. But yeah, so I did the dungeons as we leveled up, and then did all the personal story stuff. And yeah, so now we've done tier 1 and tier 2 fractals. I just have gotten enough AR to push into tier 3 fractals, so we're going to try those, I think, probably this weekend. And then, yeah, we're doing our first raid at the end of the week. So I'm curious to see. So we're talking about doing this raid, and now we have to figure out, at this point, composition does matter a bit, it seems. So we're just trying to navigate those things, but it'll be fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
And it's so nice hearing about you doing it and it is funny, especially without having that Trinity for dungeons, because my first was World Boss, and I was doing Shadow Behemoth, and it was my very first one. And so I'm like, well, I'm DPSing, I'm not really doing anything else. And so, if he's being tanked to face one way, DPS should never be in front of the boss and should stack on his buns, right? Not for this world boss. Everybody apparently should have been all together stacked in front of the boss so that they could get all of the AoE heals. And I'm like behind the boss trying to hit
Yeah,
ads that are coming out of the portal. So I don't know if you've done how many world bosses you've done yet, or if you had come across anything like that. But that was my
well,
thing.
just
It wasn't even the dungeon.
yeah, just in general. I mean, the like sharing of boons and the fact, like basically everyone stacking, and I guess I don't know, in approaching the fights at first, I was like, I'm not even like, I am in Narnia. Like, I have gone through the wardrobe. I am out there. Like, the rest of my team is stacked, and I am just like ranged with my great sword, like jumping over the different mechanics. And I'm like, why are you guys just stacked in one spot and like soaking this damage and kind of navigating that like realization of, okay, wait, it's actually best for us to stack together and I guess we know when certain things actually need to be avoided and then other things, not everything is equally as hazardous, right? And so just
Mhm.
kind of navigating those things has been interesting. I'm doing a better job of it, but yeah, I definitely, that was a new part of the experience for me. But I will say, like, tying that back in again to like the gearing and the builds and that flexibility. And I think the fact that you have this like freedom of forming groups as you level has been, all of those things are extremely nice for new players and something that's been really great for all of us, I think, because there's never really been a point at which we were going through it and it felt restrictive or scary to make a decision. It's like, okay, if we want to go into a dungeon, we can go right in with any people who are available to go. If we get a piece of gear and we want to choose, to use it in this fight, or like we get new build abilities and we want to choose to experiment with something, it's okay to do it because we can change those things just as easily as we selected them.
Mhm.
And I think that's been a really really nice. Some of that forgiveness and flexibility for our new players, especially, has been cool.
Absolutely, and I'm actually really excited because I've talked to Stay Safe and Luxtos trying to ask about how they feel about the differences in content going through, and they're like, "Well, we haven't gotten to fractals or strikes yet." So I can actually ask you, how do you feel about the
I
difference
know.
between dungeons and explorables going to into fractals, having them take less time, but having like those added extra like little jump puzzles or possibly little mechanics that you have to do on the bosses, and then from there compared to strikes. And which one do you like best?
So I've done a lot of, yes, we've done a lot of the fractals. We had so much fun with the fractals actually that we sat down, we did all of tier one in one sitting. We
Mhm.
sat down to do the first couple and we did all of tier one in one night. So like we have enjoyed the fractals quite a bit. Um, I We just did the strike missions for the first time 2 days ago as a guild, so we have had way less experience with those. So it's tough to compare them, but I'll say I think as far as the preparation for doing them, I think it felt pretty intuitive since we had done so many dungeons. It felt like a natural progression of things. We would always do the dungeon and then the explorable mode of the dungeon, so kind of stepping it up a notch. And so then I think fractals felt inherently that way. And I mean, there are the tiers of fractals, so you can progress them a bit. And that was the intention with running the strike missions, was to have that stepping stone towards raiding, is, getting us into a group that's more than five for the first time, seeing a bit of what a boss mechanic will look like. And then, the next step beyond that would be going into the raid. So it's felt pretty good, and it's been interesting because I feel like I don't know any better than to just jump into the content, and it has been interesting to see the perspective of people being like, oh wow, like I'm surprised you guys are going into fractals or like gonna going to attempt trade, because I guess because I played it blind, I didn't know that that was something that people waited to do more often than not. So I would encourage, I guess, other new players to take that same approach because it's been fun just jumping in and trying stuff. I don't think you have to put barriers around the content. Just get in there, get your max level, and try it out, and then kind of learn by going through it. Has worked for us. So, well,
Absolutely.
kind of. I mean, who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows
It's
how?
still
Like
fun.
it's not. Yeah, it's not always clean progression, but just like it's okay to
Is it
just jump in
ever?
and figure things out. you know.
We always
But
just had
yeah.
a joke about wipe till it's clean for WoW, and it was just like you'd have two people alive, clean run, world first.
Yeah, well, and it's like sometimes you run into things when you're doing it like that you just know by playing the game, but we haven't known as new players. So I remember we coined this term like in learning the mechanics of Guild Wars 2 and the basic principles of fights. Like we've been taking each thing as training, right? So it's like even if we're doing our guild mission, we kill one bounty target in the world, and it's a super easy fight. I like kind of memingly am like, okay, guys, like let's go. Like the bar is blue, you know what to do. Like CC that guy, right? Like we're prepping for our raids, and so we've kind of like coined that phrase, and then going into our strike missions, we learned that there are actually like times where that doesn't apply. I guess there's like one strike mission boss that if you CC during the blue bar, like can bug the fight out and make it exponentially harder. So here I am like yelling at everybody like, all right, it's blue. Why is that bar not breaking? So everyone like broke the bar, but they were like, no, we weren't supposed to break it. It's gonna bug the fight out. And I was like, oh no, like, but you don't know those things as a new player, so you kind of
Right.
learn them as you go along. All you can do is, try to do your best, right? And
Yeah.
as long as you're in there with people that are doing the same, it's a lot of fun.
And it's actually even for a bounty good that you call stuff like that out, especially as a new player. I actually think that's really great because I feel like there are a lot of people who still don't know what that is. Like
Yeah,
even
well, that's always
veterans.
been, yeah, well, I think that's also like built into, I guess it depends on the game and the overall community, but I feel like that was always an issue uh, in like classic WoW, especially like any game that's been around for a long time, is people assume that other players know what's going on. And
Hmm.
that assumption creates way more problems than there need to be in your raid. So, as somebody who is either like main tanking as I used to do, or like just raid leading in general, I've always said that the best thing, like, I can't, be upset with somebody for not doing something if I've not even asked them to do that something, right? Like I don't assume that people know what to do, and I don't know what to do, right? So we're learning it together in this
Hmm.
case. But so like, I don't know. There were just like times. Like I remember a good example of this was in Classic when EQ40 came out. We went into EQ40 and the first pull, if you know that fight, there are these four mobs and they like absorb the other mobs' abilities when they die. So you want to
Hmm.
kill them in a certain order, and I was our main tank, but I was not the raid lead. So we go in, pull number one, and the raid lead said that they were going to call out the order of the kill. And they clammed up like they didn't say anything. Nobody knew the order
Oh
to kill it in.
no.
And then we wipe the first pull of that raid. And the raid lead got pissed, like so mad about it because he's like, come on, guys, you know, this game's been out. We've been playing this game for 15 years. How do you guys not know the order? And I like calmly am like, okay, so let's talk about it. Can you go ahead and tell me what the order should have been? And just silence. And it turned out that like not a single person in the raid actually knew the
Even
order.
the
Like
raid
there
lead.
was always like, yeah, like there was always somebody that knew it. And I'm like, okay, let's back this up a second. Like first off, like let's learn the order so we can call it out. And so I usually like I take that approach. Like I try to know things to the point of like if you ever have a question, ask it. Like don't feel like it's there's no stupid question, but then also like I can set the expectation of what to do, because otherwise it's like, yeah, there's one thing about people under like actually being able to execute a mechanic, but like if you aren't able to enumerate that mechanic for them, you can't really like fault them for not getting it right. So that's always been like as part of that like educational piece is um and something that I'm gonna try to do as we move forward out of like going through the blind first playthrough to actually mastering the material, if you will, is like knowing those things. So then, yeah, next time we do that strike mission, I can tell everybody, hey guys, remember that rule about the blue bar? This is actually a weird one, but it doesn't apply here, And then like we all know to not do that, right? And so I think that's like, yeah,
Yeah,
doing those things is
absolutely.
helpful for sure.
And it's funny that you mentioned that because that's kind of how I always read Lead 2, and it was just like calling out everything as well because I wasn't sure how many people had done things yet or if they actually knew the mechanic I was talking about. Like, especially if you have like, I don't know if you ever have like lingo or slang terms once you've done a fight long enough, so it's not the actual ability name that you say, or it's something silly. Like if it's an AoE around the boss, people in 14 would call that a donut. And so you'd be like, watch out for the
Mhm.
donut, and people would be like, what donut? So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's a lot, and I mean, there's so many things that I still don't know, and so we're kind of learning them together. But it's always cool to get to that point where you know the content enough to do it, and then obviously your group that you're running with will know that information. But then sometimes it's nice to like help people in chat and stuff, right? So like if somebody asks, like sometimes I'll verbalize my thought process, like when I would be tanking to help people understand like what a proper rotation looks like when you're tanking, because it's like it's just good for people to know things. You know, it's better to know them than to like just be intimidated by what there is to learn. So,
absolutely.
um, yeah, get there one day.
And so, is there anything in Guild Wars 2 that you think shines better than any other MMO that you've played so far? Just a feature that you think Guild Wars 2 has really nailed and you would maybe like to see it in a different MMO?
I think my favorites, and this might be it's hard to pick like one thing, but I think the biggest strength that I've noticed so far in Guild Wars 2 compared to the other MMOs that I've played for me individually anyways has been the fact that you can be in 5 guilds and have that like abundance of community in the game. So I think like at baseline the fact that there are no opposing factions and uh, like everybody is kind of existing on the same realm, even if you're on different servers. Like you're all together in that content. I think it is so helpful for community and feeling connected to the rest of the player base. And so I think also having the freedom to be in multiple guilds and there it just seems like there's always like something that you can be a part of and something that's going on, and I think that that's been such a great part of the playthrough so far is not feeling so restricted. Like I can only play with, I mean, the only restriction is not being able to play with EU players, I guess, as an
Mm-hmm.
NA player. But outside of that, even so, we can still be in the same guild and at least socially engage with each other, even if we can't be like in the world playing together. So I've really loved that aspect of it for sure.
And is there anything opposite? Is there something you'd like to see in Guild Wars 2 that you haven't yet that you really love in a different MMO?
Hmm. I feel like there is, and I'm trying to remember. Like I feel like recently I realized there was something that wasn't in the game, and it's escaping me at the moment. But I feel like we've talked about it on stream, or just something that I thought was a little strange. I can't remember what it was. I don't know. Yeah, I see Bacon in the chat. Some of my chat is here. I guess for me, it has been a little challenging that you can, or not. Okay, it's I guess the opposite of challenging, but challenging personally, like, is that you can ignore so many of the mechanics by
Mm-hmm.
stacking. I I don't love that. Does that make sense? So I
Yes.
get that that's a thing in Guild Wars 2, but I wish that it was more punishing in the sense of I wish that you had to do like how I approached the fights as a new player, not knowing that you could just stack and zerg down the boss. I wish that that's how it looked. Like I wish that in the raid setting, it felt like everyone needed to be constantly moving and like going, like avoiding those abilities. And there's probably content like it's hard to comment on because I haven't gotten into the end game content, and it may change once we get into higher level fractals and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
there's seemingly so many chances to like avoid mechanics in fights that I think are designed so well. So there have been fights where I'm like, this is so cool. These AoEs going out, these beams that you need to avoid, but realistically, some of those things can just be entirely avoided by like standing in a pile
Yep.
on the base of the boss. And I 100%, yeah, Inspector is right about that in the chat. That's been like my biggest qualm as somebody who loves like end game content is I wish, the design of those things was, I guess, because it's the design of it is great, and then like the players, like it's like a meta that has emerged where like you can just like obviously you're gonna take the path of least resistance. That's just what you're gonna do. Oh, sorry, my dog. And also there's advantages to stacking with the boons and stuff like that. So it is gonna be what it's gonna be. But it would be so nice to actually see those fights executed in a way where everybody's actually avoiding the mechanics and stuff. I think
Hmm.
that would make it really cool because I think some of the fights and the design of how they've blown me away. But then like we're just stacking, so it's kind of you're throwing those things to the wayside. Yeah,
Hmm. Like the
for
amount
sure.
of stacking, or if you can do enough DPS to get past a mechanic, which has been
Right.
it's great that you mentioned that because that's been my thing about raids because I always pride myself, especially, and you'll appreciate this as another raid lead, but especially coming from a raid lead perspective where you're just like, I appreciate people's ability to actually do the mechanics to a T for a clean kill rather than just DPSing to skip even a whole phase. And it's
Well, and it feels
always,
so cool to see like everyone on your team doing the dance and like getting through those things
Mhm.
together. Yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And it's one of those things where even like vets who are very serious about rating and doing all of the high end content say that maybe it would be better if Guild Wars 2 made that specific content, or the devs made that specific content more challenging so that way people can't do that rather than anything else. But who knows?
Yeah.
It has
So that
been
would
a
that would
big
definitely
conversation.
that's definitely the main thing that comes to mind. And it was hard for me to like remember that off the top of my head, but that's definitely one thing that we've talked about a good bit so far as we've gotten into the end game content. And I don't know if there's other stuff out there that I'm just unaware of at the moment or what, but overall it's been such a positive experience, but that's been one of the criticisms because I feel like you don't want things to be too punishing so that people don't want to do them at all or they get discouraged, but having some degree of challenge built into things makes the content exciting and something that people want to continue to do. And if it gets into the point of like you just go in and like you stack regardless of the fights,
Mhm.
then it's like I feel like you just inherently like feel a little bit less incentivized to play through that content. Like,
Right. Or just less
yeah.
incentivized to learn the way the fight should work to begin
Yeah,
with,
right. That
or any
too.
fight.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'd be cool to see that shift a little.
Mhm. And since you've had such a positive reaction and you're so excited about the game, would you say that this is a good game for people just getting into MMOs as a new player, or just overall? Like, did you really enjoy your new player experience, and would you recommend the game to other people?
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, I've enjoyed it, as I showed up thinking it might be like a 1 day limited edition stream, and I've never left. And so, what I always tell people is I think, again, everyone is looking for something different in an MMO. And so, I think you have to in order to know if it's going to be a good game for you, the best thing that you can do is just jump in and try it with an open mind and give it a chance and see if it's the right fit for you. And the great thing about Guild Wars 2 is it's so easy to do that. There's so little investment. It's free to play through basically all of the content that I've played so far has been free to play. And so I always just encourage people to download it and try it because there's no harm in it, and then you can delete it if you don't like it. But I've had an absolute blast. So many people have had an absolute blast, and I think it's a great game, definitely worth trying. And I also have been telling people too, I think it's a good time if you're thinking about playing it for the first time. I feel like it is a really good time to get into it because so many people are, getting back into the game, coming, back looking towards the next expansion, and that also gives you some time to get a couple of tunes leveled up, get through the core story of the game and get some things done before the expansion is actually live. So I do think it's a as good of a time as any to get back into it or start it for the first time
Mhm.
if somebody is considering doing that.
And speaking of the expansion and all of the new elite specializations coming out, I don't know if you've seen all of the release trailers, but obviously you're talking
Hmm.
about playing Chrono on your Mesmer. How do you feel about having the elite specializations rather than like a subclass that you would level at, or choose a spec at 30 or have your character evolve into that class like Final Fantasy XIV? Do you like the idea of the elite specializations now that you've played one?
I the verdict is still out on this one for me, so I have gotten only one of my two elite specs on my Mesmer, and it's felt a little interesting to be in that situation where in order to have hit max level and then being in need of like progressing into the next maps and collecting those hero points to be able to get both elite specs and try them out.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there are some ways around this. People have talked to me about like if you have a level 80 boost, you can apply it and then it doesn't have to stay on the tune. Like you can actually revert it. So basically, you can pop that on, experiment with the elite spec, at least in PvE, but then there's apparently, I guess, some other way you can go into PvP and try it out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but basically, so with the timing of how I've leveled, I got the start of my elite specialization, and then I went through some sort of a hero point train in order to like fully maximize the one, but I haven't actually done my second one. So I'm still new to the elite specializations and kind of trying to understand what those look like. So it's tough for me to comment on. I do wonder if it would be nice to make those. I don't know if it's just my experience. It's because I'm so new to this part of the game, but I do think it could be nice if basically in the leveling process to 80, if it was more like inclusive of the points that you needed to unlock the elite specs, so that I don't know. I guess in my case, it's felt like I kind of hit max, and then I really need to like go funnel some hero points in order to open them up, and that's part of why I haven't, because there's been so many other things that we've been doing that to like sit down and do like a hero point train hasn't been something that I've been motivated to do, but I will do it so that I can tank as Chronomancer on Friday's raid.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we'll see, but I do again like I like that you can customize your tune in that it seems like at least from what I'm seeing with my Mesmer, and it seems like for some of the other classes as well, that the elite specs are viable regardless of what you want to play. Whereas in the past, again, like playing classic WoW, there were some specs that were completely just irrelevant. Like you would never play it, and so they were never played. And I know that there's like the concept still of meme specs, and like some people will not run this build for this situation, but I
Mm-hmm.
do feel like there's at least some context in which like people can play their elite spec that they want to in some regard, and there are some things that just are never that were never played in something like classic WoW. So I do feel like even though there's still like I guess the concept of meme specs, it seems to be a little less prominent. But again, I haven't gone too into the elite specs or played multiple classes to know fully what that looks like yet. So we'll see.
Gotcha. That was an afterthought because I was like, oh, just the positivity and ending all of this. And then I was thinking about it, and you were like, oh, talking about Chrono previously. So I'm like, I should ask because it's been a big topic of debate just with all of the new elite specializations coming out versus how they play compared to the core classes. And then coming from a different MMO, it could be a big difference in playstyle swapping from core to an elite specialization because it's almost some people say it's like a subclass, some people say it feels like a whole different playstyle. So I was curious, but
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious to see what it'll look like because I really, like I said, I haven't done Chrono yet, so it'll be interesting to see. I guess I'll
mhm,
let you know once once we get through
perfect.
Friday how that feels.
And I had forgot to mention to chat. I'm sorry, guys. This is the second time I've done a podcast live, and so for the most part, was not paying attention to chat. But I know Silver is super nice about doing this, even though she hasn't felt super well today. So I won't keep you for too much longer, but I didn't know if chat had any questions for you that we could possibly ask and answer that might be a little bit fun. I know we have both of our communities here, so does anybody have a question about Silver's experience or her stream or content creation? Oh, I did see one that I didn't mention, but it was something about how much you love Black Lion chests. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Oh, okay. Well, that has been something that, yeah, that my chat has kind of, we've created I, it's a little, I don't know. We enjoy a little bit of gamba from time to time, and I do not have the resources for ecto gambling yet.
Mhm.
So the compromise has been to do some black lion chests, and we have like a whole process for it. If somebody sends keys, or if I get keys through my leveling, once we get 5, I have one of the Watchwork portal devices, and they guess where it's going to teleport me. I use that. That's like the first part of the gambling experience is where will we end up? And then we go to wherever we're going to end up. And we'll open up the keys. And so the question is always, am I going to get that 5th box to proc in the chest and get something really good? And they'll do like prediction points about it. And so it's been a fun thing. So sometimes they hold me hostage because they'll just like do a coordinated attack where we'll be like going to do something and then they're like, it's time for some chess, and then they'll send some keys and we do that. But yeah, they're just memeing.
That's fun. Ecto is a whole different. Like, there are some people who are very serious about their Ecto gambling, and I did like one because I have been giving away all of my Ecto, but it is funny how much of a meme it is to some people, and to other people, it's like life. Like, no, this is the only way I'm able to make gold or get any of the items that I need. So
Yeah, no, I've always gotten like gold and traditional ways and stuff, but it has been something again like having in general just some of these like the keys and stuff like that. It's also different from anything that I've been doing for a long time. So it's fun. I don't really do any real life gambling, but we have fun in game doing it anyways. So yeah.
And we do have another question from Sneedcat. I know we talked about a little bit about your approach to how you wanted to do raids, how you wanted to do a bunch of new people. And Sneed is asking if you're definitely going to do that completely blind, or if you're going to bring 1 or 2 experienced players to help you lead, or if it's just going to be all new people, completely blind.
So it's been and this might be understandably so, but it has been challenging to get all completely new player groups because a lot of people have played at least some of the content before. So especially when it comes to like a 10-person team, it's hard to do. It's not going to be entirely new players, but one thing that we've talked about as we've gone through it is we do have a subset of new players, in some cases the majority, and so it's kind of trying to let those players like take the lead a little bit. And so when we did our strike missions, we had one person who kind of knew some things, and they would give us a little bit of an overview, and then I was able to communicate that to the raid as well. So like for example, like I didn't know about that blue bar 30% thing. Had I, like, we probably would have communicated that in advance, but then they knew afterwards. And we have had a couple of people who have volunteered. I see Teapot in the chat saying
Yep.
that he'll join. We've also had a couple other of the streamers who have said the same thing, because I think the fear is that when you push into content completely blind, you don't want people to get discouraged or like be left with that feeling of like, oh my god, we can never do this, right? So it's nice to have an experienced eye, if that experienced eye is willing to not like completely hard carry the group, so to speak. So we've tried to balance that. So we have some people who have the knowledge, but they're also allowing the new players to go in. And so when it comes to my preparation, I'm actually going to try. The week has gotten away from me, so I haven't prepped at all. But when it comes to preparing for it, my plan is I do want to actually try to understand, because I'm going in, trying to tank this for these people. So that's it's like in a very important role. So I want to at least try to understand what my tanking rotation should look like and try to set the group up for success in that way. So I'm not going to be like going in completely blind as far as my chrono rotation goes, I guess. But the verdict is out on the amount that we're going to prepare for the raid. I still haven't decided, so I guess stay tuned. We'll find out. But yeah, I guess we have to know a little bit because we also have to make sure our raid comp looks okay. So we aren't going to have like a completely scuffed all healer group of new players or anything, but it'll be a balance of new and knowledge,
It'd still be
I
fun.
guess. Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm excited.
But I won't keep you for too much longer because my puppy has been freaking out too. And obviously you don't feel well, so I really appreciate you doing this. If you just want to remind
great.
everybody, I mean, I know it's been in chat, I know it's been on the stream and everything, but we just really need people to know exactly where they can find you. So if you want to let everyone know again.
Yeah, so I stream full time here on Twitch. You can find me at SilverTV, and then on all the other platforms, but my primary one is Twitter. You can find me at SilverSableTV. And I guess as a note of mentioning, we do have a guild that we have created with a bunch of new players and also veteran players as well. So if you guys are looking for an additional guild to get involved with and you want a place to learn, you're more than welcome to come learn with us. So you can do a chat command in my chat for that. It's !guild if you want to get involved with that. But yeah, Silver TV on Twitch is the main one. And then I live on Twitter when I'm not live on Twitch, so that's the second best place to find me.
Awesome. And just so everybody knows, this podcast after tonight, if you missed some or you came in late, will also be on YouTube and Anchor if you just want to hear the audio, because I'll have that there. Anchor and Spotify. So yeah, I really appreciate you doing this. This was a lot of fun. And thank you guys so much in chat for being patient with our second time doing this. I feel bad ignoring chat. It's like one of my biggest things when I stream, because I've been like you. I'm just like, all right, so I'm doing this and it's really serious, but oh yes, I had a really good day. Thank you for asking, and then go into that. So like, I actually feel really bad about not getting back to everyone in chat. So thank you guys so much, and thank you, Silver. You feel so ignored. But I will have
spend some time with them. It's been nice getting to hang out. Sorry, chat. I'll give Xandrii back to you now. You guys can hang out.
Oh, you're actually
but
perfectly
thank you for having
fine,
me
because I'm gonna
a lot
have
of fun.
dinner. So I'm actually gonna stop streaming for the night now.
Oh, okay. All right. Well then, sorry, not sorry, chat. She'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah,
I guess.
I'll see you guys tomorrow.